This is Scott. I need to inform you of an immediate organizational restructuring that affects your position. My name's Kevin Hartwell, and until 26 hours ago, I was the Senior Project Director at Atlas Construction Corporation, overseeing 3 major pipeline projects across Texas and Oklahoma worth $1.2 billion in contracts. I'm 49 years old, spent 10 years with the Army Corps of Engineers building bridges in places you wouldn't want to visit, and the last 15 years turning Atlas into the most reliable infrastructure contractor from Houston to Tulsa. What I never expected was for CEO Scott Morrison to decide my expertise was expendable at 1:05 a.m. on a Tuesday, communicated through a phone call lasting exactly 3 minutes and 47 seconds. Give me a break. Who fires somebody in the middle of the night? The call came while I was in my home office outside Houston, reviewing safety protocols for a critical Chevron pipeline section that needed inspection clearance by 6 a.m. This wasn't unusual. Oil and gas construction operates on deadlines tighter than a tick's grip, meaning someone's got to monitor night shifts when things go sideways. For 15 years, that someone had been me. What kind of restructuring? I asked, already running through possibilities while watching real-time status updates from our Odessa, Corpus Christi, and Tulsa project sites. Your position as Senior Project Director is being eliminated effective immediately. We're consolidating project oversight under our new VP of Strategic Development, who brings a more streamlined approach to infrastructure management. Streamlined approach. Corporate BS for we hired someone cheaper who doesn't know a pipeline from a garden hose. Scott, I'm managing 3 active projects with safety inspections scheduled for tomorrow morning. Can't this wait until normal business hours? I'm afraid not. The decision's been finalized and must be implemented immediately for administrative efficiency. Administrative efficiency at 1:05 a.m. while pipeline crews couldn't afford to stop work. That's rich. Hold on a second, I said. You're firing me in the middle of active construction schedules because it's administratively efficient? What kind of sense does that make? Kevin, who's taking over project oversight for current operations? Ryan Phillips, our new VP of Strategic Development, will assume responsibility for all project functions. He's got extensive experience with infrastructure optimization. Ryan Phillips. I'd never heard the name, which meant he'd been hired without input from the guy who actually understood Atlas's operations. Typical corporate move. Has Ryan been briefed on tomorrow's inspection schedules and safety protocols? He'll receive comprehensive transition documentation and will coordinate with site managers as needed. Transition documentation for operations that required split-second decisions based on 15 years of knowing which inspectors were sticklers, which equipment needed babysitting, and which contractors would cut corners if you didn't watch them like a hawk. Scott, Atlas's operations aren't something you hand off with paperwork. There are inspector relationships, environmental compliance issues, weather contingencies that can shut down a project faster than you can say lawsuit. Kevin, we appreciate your dedication, but we have confidence in our transition planning. Ryan brings fresh perspective to operational challenges that may have become overly complex under previous management. Previous management. That'd be me, the guy who'd built Atlas's safety record from 78% to 98% over 15 years, avoiding the regulatory shutdowns that killed our competitors and kept our insurance premiums from going through the roof. When does this transition take effect? Immediately. We need you to cease all project activities and transfer access credentials to Ryan by 2 a.m. Cease project activities while 3 major pipeline sites were running night shifts with active safety monitoring and environmental compliance that required constant attention. Sure, that makes perfect sense. Ryan's fully prepared to handle any operational challenges. We wouldn't make this change if we weren't confident in the transition. I stared at my monitors showing real-time data from all 3 sites. Equipment status, weather alerts, inspection schedules, crew rotations, dozens of decisions needing someone who understood how pipeline construction actually worked in the real world, not some boardroom. I understand, I said finally. You need me to brief Ryan on current project status? That won't be necessary. He prefers to assess situations independently rather than inherit previous management assumptions. Previous management assumptions, like knowing which inspectors required specific documentation, which equipment needed preventive maintenance, and which weather patterns shut down operations for safety reasons. Little details like that. I'll transfer my access credentials within the hour. Excellent. HR will contact you tomorrow about transition documentation and final administrative details. The line went dead at 1:08 a.m. 3 minutes and 47 seconds to erase 15 years of operational expertise in the middle of managing active construction sites worth $1.2 billion. I leaned back in my chair, looking at screens full of data that had soon belonged to someone else. Ryan Phillips, whoever he was about to get one hell of an education about managing pipeline construction. But that was Scott Morrison's call, not mine. You know what really got under my skin? I'd been planning to work maybe 5 more years, build up the retirement fund a bit more, make sure Susan's medical bills from her surgery last year didn't eat into our nest egg too much. Now I'm sitting here at 1 a.m. wondering if I'd have to start over somewhere else at 49. The transition process felt like disconnecting life support from a patient who still needed intensive care. At 1:47 a.m., I began systematically transferring access credentials for systems I'd built, optimized, and monitored for over a decade. Safety dashboards, contractor networks, equipment diagnostic systems, regulatory compliance protocols, layers of infrastructure that had taken years to develop, and plenty of 2 a.m. phone calls to maintain. Each system transfer felt like handing over the keys to your truck to someone who'd never driven stick. At 2:23 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number, but I recognized the Atlas Exchange. Mr. Hartwell, this is Ryan Phillips. I understand you've been managing night operations. I wanted to introduce myself and get a quick overview of current status. Ryan sounded younger than I'd expected, with that confident tone of someone who'd probably managed construction before but had never dealt with the headaches of Texas pipeline work, the inspectors who'd shut you down for a missing signature, the weather that could turn a routine job into a nightmare, the contractors who'd been doing things their way since before Ryan was born. Hello, Ryan. I've transferred all access credentials like they asked. You should have full project oversight now. Great. Can you give me a quick rundown of what's happening tonight? Any immediate concerns? I glanced at monitors I wasn't supposed to be looking at anymore. You'll need to check the project dashboards for current status. I'm not involved in operational decisions anymore. Right, of course. But just to get oriented, any critical issues I should prioritize? The question confirmed what I'd suspected. Ryan had been handed responsibility for operations with about as much preparation as a fish gets for flying. Ryan, I'd recommend reviewing current inspection schedules, checking contractor status, and monitoring weather alerts. The Odessa site's got EPA compliance verification tomorrow morning. That's a big deal. They'll shut us down if the paperwork isn't perfect. Corpus Christi's dealing with equipment maintenance issues on the main pump station, and Tulsa's got a crew rotation scheduled that affects the weekend timeline. Okay? Odessa, Corpus Christi, Tulsa. EPA, equipment, crew rotation. Got it. Anything else I should watch for? 15 years of knowing how things really worked, condensed into a casual question. Like asking someone to explain how to drive by reading the owner's manual. You'll want to monitor the site supervisors. They handle routine stuff, but safety protocols require project oversight for anything out of the ordinary. These aren't desk jobs, Ryan. When something goes wrong out there, you've got about 10 minutes to make the right call before it costs serious money or gets someone hurt. Perfect. And if I have questions, can I reach you tonight? I paused, remembering Scott Morrison's 1:05 a.m. call and his confidence that Ryan could handle everything independently. Ryan, I'm not employed by Atlas anymore as of 2 hours ago. You'll need to coordinate with site managers and shift supervisors for operational support. The silence lasted long enough for me to wonder if he'd hung up. You're no longer employed as of tonight? I thought I was taking over from you tomorrow morning. You took over at 2 a.m. when I transferred access credentials. Another pause. Mr. Hartwell, I think there's been some miscommunication. I wasn't expecting to start tonight. I haven't reviewed current operations or been briefed on ongoing issues. And there it was. Scott Morrison had fired the guy managing active construction sites and handed responsibility to someone who wasn't even ready to start. Brilliant management right there. Ryan, I'd recommend contacting Scott Morrison or HR to clarify your responsibilities and timeline. I'm not in a position to provide operational guidance anymore. After hanging up, I sat in my home office thinking about the construction sites now running without the oversight they'd depended on for 15 years. 3 major pipeline projects managing complex operations with tight deadlines and zero tolerance for regulatory screw-ups, now under the supervision of someone who hadn't even expected to be working tonight. Scott Morrison had wanted immediate administrative efficiency. He was about to get a very expensive lesson in what happens when you confuse efficiency with just plain stupidity. My phone buzzed with notifications from site supervisors seeking operational guidance, messages I wasn't allowed to answer anymore for operations I wasn't responsible for. I turned off my phone and went to bed. Whatever happened next was Ryan Phillips's problem, but I couldn't sleep. Susan rolled over and mumbled, "Everything okay, hun?" "Yeah, just work stuff. Go back to sleep." She didn't need to know I'd just been fired. Not at 2:30 in the morning. We'd talk about it over coffee when she got up. Figure out what this meant for the retirement plan, the medical bills, whether I'd need to look for work in another state. At 49, starting over wasn't exactly appealing. The first crisis hit at 4:17 a.m., which I knew because my personal phone started ringing with calls from site supervisors who had my direct number for emergencies but apparently couldn't reach Ryan. I didn't answer any of them. By 6:30 a.m., I had 14 missed calls and 23 text messages from various Atlas employees, ranging from shift supervisors asking for guidance to site managers requesting clarification on inspection priorities. Questions that should have gone to Ryan Phillips, but apparently weren't getting answered. I made coffee and sat on the back porch, watching the sun come up over the pasture behind our house. Susan came out in her robe, holding her own cup. "You're up early, even for you." "Couldn't sleep. Work problems?" I looked at my wife of 23 years, thinking about how to explain that I'd just lost the job I'd planned to retire from, the one that was supposed to get us through her medical expenses and into a comfortable retirement. "Scott fired me last night." She sat down hard in the chair next to me. "What? Why?" "Says they're streamlining operations. Hired some hotshot VP who's going to bring fresh perspective to operational challenges." "Fresh perspective?" Susan's voice had that edge it got when she was about to let loose on someone. "You built that company's reputation. How many times have you been called in the middle of the night to fix something nobody else could handle? More times than I can count. And now they think some new guy can just walk in and do what you do? Apparently." We sat there in comfortable silence, watching a hawk circle over the back 40. Susan reached over and took my hand. "We'll figure it out, Kev. We always do." At 7:45 a.m., Scott Morrison called my personal phone. "Kevin, we've got some operational issues that require your immediate assistance." "Good morning, Scott. I'm not employed by Atlas anymore as of 1:05 a.m. yesterday. You'll need to coordinate operational support through Ryan Phillips. Ryan's having some difficulty getting oriented." "No kidding." Difficulty getting oriented 6 hours after taking responsibility for $1.2 billion worth of active construction projects. "Scott, you fired me for administrative efficiency reasons. I'm not available for transition assistance. This is temporary consultation work. We're prepared to pay emergency consulting rates. Emergency consulting rates for fixing the mess created by firing me in the middle of active operations. That's a load of crap right there. I'm not available for consulting work. I'm exploring other opportunities." What I didn't mention was that my phone had been ringing since 6 a.m. with calls from Atlas's competitors, all of whom had heard through industry channels that I was suddenly available. Pipeline construction's a small world down here in Texas. Word travels faster than bad weather when someone with my track record hits the market. "Kevin, we need to discuss this situation. Can you come in this morning?" "I don't think that'd be appropriate. Ryan Phillips is fully prepared to handle operational challenges, remember? That's what you told me last night." The situation's become more complex than anticipated. Translation: everything was falling apart without the guy who actually understood how it all worked together. "I'm sure Ryan will figure it out. He brings that fresh perspective to operational challenges, right?" "Kevin, we're willing to discuss reinstatement with improved terms. Reinstatement after firing me at 1:05 a.m. for administrative efficiency. You've got to be kidding me." "Scott, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not interested in returning to a position that can be eliminated on 3 minutes' notice for administrative convenience." When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete control over my professional future. They'd fired me to streamline operations, and now we're learning that some operations can't be streamlined without the guy who knows how to make them work. The complete collapse took exactly 18 hours and 43 minutes. I watched it unfold, not from panicked phone calls, but from LinkedIn messages and texts from old buddies still working in the field. The first domino fell at 9:47 a.m. when the Odessa site failed EPA inspection. My old friend Carlos Mendez, who'd been a site supervisor there for 8 years, texted me, "Kevin, what the hell happened? New guy Ryan didn't have the right environmental permits ready. Inspectors shut us down hard." Says we can't restart until we refile everything. That's gonna take weeks, man. In operational terms, this meant Ryan hadn't understood the specific documentation sequence I'd developed over years of dealing with EPA inspectors who'd shut you down for a missing signature or a date that didn't match their computer system. When you're dealing with federal environmental compliance, there's no room for learning on the job. The second crisis hit at 2:15 p.m. when equipment breakdown at Corpus Christi triggered safety shutdowns Ryan didn't know how to override. Bobby Tucker, one of my equipment specialists, called me directly. "Kevin, I probably shouldn't be calling you, but we got a situation here. Main pump station's throwing error codes and Ryan's telling us to just restart it. But you know that Model 47 pump, if those error codes are what I think they are, restarting without the bypass procedure could blow the whole system." I dealt with that exact pump issue 3 times over the years. It required a specific shutdown sequence and manual bypass that wasn't in any manual, just something you learned from experience and nearly getting your head blown off the first time you got it wrong. "Bobby, I can't provide operational guidance anymore. You'll need to coordinate through Ryan. But Kevin, this could cost us the whole pump station. That's $250,000 in equipment and 2 weeks of downtime. I understand, Bobby, but I'm not employed there anymore." The third disaster came at 4:30 p.m. when weather delays at Tulsa cascaded into contractor scheduling conflicts that backed up the entire project timeline. Mike Williamson, our logistics coordinator up there, sent me a text that said it all. Ryan tried to reschedule the Crawford crew without checking with the other contractors. Now we got 3 crews showing up tomorrow for the same job site, and Crawford's threatening to walk off the job. This is a clusterfuck of epic proportions. I'd worked with Crawford Construction for 12 years. Old school outfit run by Jim Crawford, a Vietnam vet who didn't tolerate corporate BS but would work through hell and high water if you treated him with respect. Ryan had apparently treated him like just another vendor you could push around. By 6 p.m., all 3 sites were operating at less than 30% capacity with safety violations, environmental compliance failures, and contractor disputes that'd take weeks to resolve. I learned the full scope from an unexpected source. My former assistant, Jessica Martinez, who called at 6:47 p.m. "Kevin, I probably shouldn't be calling, but the situation here's completely insane. Ryan's been in emergency meetings all day and nobody knows how to fix what's happening." "What exactly's happening, Jessica? All 3 sites are basically shut down. Odessa failed EPA inspection and can't restart. Corpus Christi's got equipment problems nobody can solve, and Tulsa's behind schedule with contractors threatening to quit. Ryan keeps saying he needs time to assess the operational landscape. Assess the operational landscape while $1.2 billion worth of infrastructure projects sat idle because the guy who actually understood the landscape had been eliminated for administrative efficiency. Has anyone contacted the clients about delays? That's the worst part. Ryan says we should wait to see if things improve before notifying Chevron and ExxonMobil." "But Kevin, these aren't companies that tolerate surprise delays." "No, they weren't. Oil and gas companies operate on schedules tighter than Dick's hat band, with penalty clauses that could bankrupt contractors who missed deadlines. Chevron alone could hit us with $200,000 per day in late penalties. Jessica, I appreciate you calling, but I'm not in a position to provide guidance anymore. I know, it's just that everyone's asking what you do in this situation. What I do was exactly what I'd been doing for 15 years. Coordinate between sites, manage client expectations, maintain the relationships with contractors and inspectors that kept everything running smooth. But Scott Morrison had decided that coordination was too expensive to maintain. Jessica, the situation will resolve itself one way or another. Ryan's got the authority and responsibility to make operational decisions now. But what if he can't fix it?" That was the question Scott Morrison should have asked before eliminating the guy who knew how to prevent these problems in the first place. While I was talking to Jessica, my phone buzzed with another call. Number I didn't recognize, but the area code was Dallas. "Mr. Hartwell, this is Tom Bradley from Summit Infrastructure Systems. I heard you might be available for new opportunities. We'd like to discuss a partnership opportunity with you if you're interested." Summit Infrastructure, Atlas's biggest regional competitor. And they just called the guy who knew Atlas's vulnerabilities better than anyone alive. Summit Infrastructure, Atlas's biggest regional competitor. And they just called the guy who knew Atlas's vulnerabilities better than anyone alive. "I'd be interested in hearing what you have in mind, Mr. Bradley." Well, we've been looking to expand our pipeline operations, and your reputation in the industry speaks for itself. We're not talking about just a job here. We're talking about a partnership. You'd come in as VP of Pipeline Operations with equity stake and full authority to build your own team. Build my own team. That was music to my ears, especially knowing that half of Atlas's best people were probably updating their resumes right about now. By Friday afternoon, industry publications were running stories about Atlas's operational disruptions. Atlas Construction faces multi-site delays ran in Pipeline and Gas Journal, followed by analyses in Construction Weekly and Energy Infrastructure Today. The articles were diplomatically worded, but the message was crystal clear. Atlas was having serious problems that affected major energy clients. The knockout punch came from the clients themselves. Chevron issued a formal notice of contract review, citing reliability concerns in contractor performance. ExxonMobil implemented emergency contingency planning to source alternative contractors. Within 4 days, Ryan Phillips had managed to damage relationships I'd spent 15 years building. The call I'd been expecting came Friday evening from Rachel Thompson, Atlas's board chairwoman. "Mr. Hartwell, I'm calling to discuss a potential consulting engagement to help Atlas address operational challenges we're experiencing." "What kind of challenges are you experiencing, Mrs. Thompson?" "Multi-site coordination issues affecting project timelines and client relationships. We believe your expertise could help resolve these complications." I looked out my kitchen window at Susan working in her flower garden, thinking about the 15 years I'd spent building systems that Scott Morrison had destroyed in a single phone call. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm not available for consulting work. I've accepted a position elsewhere." The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. "Mr. Hartwell, surely we can discuss terms competitive with any other offer." "Mrs. Thompson, 4 days ago Atlas fired me at 1:05 a.m. for administrative efficiency. Today you're offering premium rates to fix the problems that decision created. What's changed isn't my availability. It's your understanding of what operational expertise is actually worth. What would it take to bring you back?" I thought about all those 2 a.m. phone calls over the years, all the emergencies I'd handled, all the relationships I'd built with contractors and inspectors and crew chiefs who trusted me to do right by them. It'd take competent leadership that understands the difference between cutting costs and cutting capabilities, Mrs. Thompson. Summit Infrastructure offered that. Atlas apparently didn't. 3 weeks later, I walked into Summit's Dallas headquarters for my first day as VP of Pipeline Operations. Tom Bradley introduced me to the team, and I started making phone calls to people I'd worked with for years. Carlos Mendez was my first hire. "Kevin, I've been waiting for your call. This place is falling apart without you. When can I start?" Bobby Tucker came over the following week, along with Mike Williamson and half a dozen other key people who'd made Atlas's operations actually work. Even old Jim Crawford called to say he'd be happy to work with me again. "Kevin, that Ryan character tried to tell me how to run my crew. Nobody tells Jim Crawford how to do construction, especially some suit who's never held a wrench. But you've been in the trenches. I'll work for you anytime." Within 6 months, Summit won the contract for the $400 million Trans-Texas Pipeline project, a deal I'd been developing for Atlas for 3 years before they fired me. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the industry. I received one final contact from Atlas 9 months after my termination, Scott Morrison calling from what sounded like a much smaller office. "Kevin, I was hoping we could meet to discuss lessons learned and potential future collaboration." "I don't think that'd be productive, Scott." "Kevin, I made some mistakes in how we handled the transition. I'd like to make things right." "You made one mistake, Scott. You confused having operations with understanding them. Some lessons are too expensive to teach twice." 2 years later, Atlas was sold to a larger firm for 60% below peak valuation. Industry analysts specifically cited operational instability and loss of institutional knowledge as key factors that had weakened the company's market position. Meanwhile, Summit Infrastructure had become the dominant pipeline contractor from Houston to Denver. Our operations were generating $800 million in annual revenue, and we'd won contracts from every major energy company Atlas had lost. Susan and I were sitting on the back porch one evening watching that same hawk circle over the pasture. She'd made a full recovery from her surgery. Our retirement fund was looking healthier than it had in years. And I'd just gotten off the phone with Tom Bradley about expanding into Oklahoma. "You know what's funny?" she said. "What's that?" "They fired you to save money, and you ended up making more money for their competition than you ever would have made for them. That's about the size of it. And you did it without screwing anybody over, just by being good at your job. She was right. I hadn't sabotaged Atlas or tried to hurt anybody. I'd just taken my expertise somewhere it was appreciated and let natural consequences take their course. I kept one memento from my Atlas years, the final quarterly safety report showing record numbers, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that expertise isn't overhead you can eliminate when times get tough. It's the foundation everything else depends on. Scott Morrison learned that the hard way. Turns out you can't fire institutional knowledge and then rent it back when you realize you need it. Some things can't be streamlined, optimized, or made more efficient. They just need someone who knows how to make them work. And if you don't value that expertise, somebody else will. That's not revenge, that's just business. I raised my coffee cup toward the setting sun. Here's to fresh perspectives, I said to nobody in particular. Susan laughed. You're terrible. Maybe so. But I'm terrible with a secure retirement and a company that actually appreciates what I bring to the table. Sometimes the best revenge is just being really good at what you do. Somewhere that understands what that's worth. You can fire a man, but you can't fire what he knows. And you sure as hell can't fire the relationships he's built over 15 years of doing the job right.